So meet the mystery speaker of this year, Marcin Wichary, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Marcin. So just one thing I have to ask. Pet crocodile, is the thing?
No, it's an alligator.
It's an alligator, all right. Okay, well, Marcin, everyone.
How many of you remember the first iPod? I actually don't remember it myself. It was too expensive to buy at the time. But I bought one recently, and I was actually kind of astonished how well it holds up and how there's so many things to admire about it as a designer. Like it has, like the enclosure and the proportions and the materials are still really, really good, and it's really, really well put together. And you know, there's a little 5 gigabyte hard drive inside, and it doesn't really feel as impressive today, but back then it really changed our relationship with music in many ways. And the click wheel, right? The click wheel that used to be really, really fun and eventually morphed into multi-touch on the PowerBook trackpads and then, of course, on the iPhones and iPads today. But I think my favorite thing about the iPod is the font. Apple did something unprecedented that I don't think ever happened before in the history of computing. They took the old font from the Macintosh called Chicago from 1984 and transplanted it into 2001 to put it on their... How many of you are by now suspicious? Like, Marcin, something's really wrong with your slide. Anybody feeling something funny? This is not Chicago. This is the font from Windows 3.1, which I just put just to see what it's like. Of course, this is Chicago, right? This is Chicago. Come on, this is Chicago. Chicago, a beautiful typeface. And it's really interesting how, if you compare those two old operating systems, how much of their personality really boils down to the typeface they use. And it's sort of astonishing because you didn't have that much room for a typeface. If you take Chicago and it's, 26 letters, give or take, and then disassemble them, it's only 1,800 pixels. It's only 1,800 pixels. Do you know what else has 1,800 pixels today? The icon for Wi-Fi on your corner of your computer. and it's, to me, that's really, really cool that you can encode so much personality into a font, given these constraints. If you look at modern system fonts, they all kind of look the same, right? If you grab Roboto, if you grab San Francisco Inter, as a matter of fact, I just lied to you again. This is not the right order. Of course it's not the right order. This is the right order, right? They all look, maybe this is not even the right order. I don't know. I'm not here to actually pick on those fonts because, it's 40 years later. System fonts have different responsibilities and a lot more work to do. But it is interesting to me how, back in the day, you needed so very little to put so much personality into a font. And there's something really interesting about pixel fonts that allow you to do that. So I wanted to talk to you about pixel fonts today. Pixel fonts seem like not that attractive, right? The real fonts are the vector fonts. They can scale to any size you want. Pixel fonts were what happened in those 3 decades or 4 decades, 1970s, 80s, 90s, when computers were just not good enough to output real fonts. And they're really, really limited, right? They have this very, very limited space to express themselves. And yet, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you have relationships with pixel fonts you might not be aware of. And I actually want to check in and show you a few fonts without a lot of context cues and see if anybody can recognize them. If anybody actually spends so much time with a pixel font that it's familiar. Anybody knows what this font is? Yeah, please shout it out. Yeah, so somebody said Commodore Nintendo. It's one of those classic arcade fonts. This is actually Atari and Namco, but they all look very similar. It was there in the 70s and 80s all around us in arcade games, and I'm pretty sure there are some games that still use it even today because it's such a distinctive font. Something a little bit harder. Anybody recognizes this? Yeah? Sorry? No, but this is close. So this is actually and I'm sure you will immediately notice it, it's actually the Windows XP font, Tahoma, that is funny because, it doesn't look that impressive today, but back then when it came out, also in 2001, such a breath of fresh air compared to the font that came before it immediately felt incredibly dated. Here's another font with some context cues. Yes, this is actually the Nokia font that many of you might have used back in the day. And one, I'm actually curious if anybody here will recognize it. This is a pretty obscure one. It's the right era. So this is a font from the only one Belgian microcomputer that exists. It was called Die. I don't think it was very popular. As a matter of fact, a lot of people used those computers that people shouted out. I actually ended up finding the chip that had the font in it and reverse engineer it. And it's a kind of interesting, right? Look at the J or the stars. They're so distinctive. And there are probably many other pixel fonts you will recognize. If you were in New York at a certain time, you will probably immediately recognize this classic font from the Times Square news sticker that was there around the 90s and 2000s. There's this, which is this sort of workhorse 5x7 pixel font. You can see it everywhere on intercoms, in elevators, in all sorts of places. You will probably see it sometime today as you walk around the city. It's everywhere. This, some people might recognize, of course, the Minecraft font. Got pretty famous over time and also very, very quirky and distinctive. And then there's this. One of the most recognizable fonts used to be very popular in all sorts of hi-fi equipment of a certain era, all sorts of VCRs, cameras, that kind of stuff. And I actually wanted to pause here, no pun intended, because this whole thing is very interesting to me for other reasons. So I don't know how many people still actually remember using a VCR with VHS tapes or betas, but it used to be a very common thing. It used to be the first popular video recording and playback thing that you could put in your home and use. And it's actually kind of a marvel of engineering. If you ever watch a video explaining how the VHS works, I think you will be inspired and impressed. I know it looks obsolete today. It's a 50-year-old technology. But the amount of ingenuity and inventiveness they put to make it all work, it's still relatable even today. But it was also the cultural aspect of VHS that's really important. H-Bomber Guy on YouTube, I don't know how many people follow H-Bomber Guy. He had this great video talking about how VHS changed cinema because the resolution is so low, the quality is so bad, the color rendering is just atrocious, and that means you can make movies for cheap. And it means you can get away with all sorts of stuff that you cannot today, and it allowed a lot more expressiveness from people. For example, this is Aliens on VHS, right? And how much work your brain is doing right now to fill in the blanks. Like, what is this actually? What are we looking at? What is happening here? At some moment, you will see a guy in a costume running out, and you will feel like Alien, right? It looks like Alien because you are doing a lot of work to fill in the blanks. Now, if you look at Aliens in 4K, this is not 4K, this is 1080p, but there's just so much more that you can immediately notice, right? None of the details are secret anymore. You just see all of them. And there's something we kind of lost in this transition, and it was something beautiful for a moment that the cardboard thing looked like a spaceship and a guy in a costume looked like Alien. And it helped a lot, and something we lost. And it's interesting to me to talk about nostalgia, and I think about it a lot because it's a complicated thing, right? Nostalgia, if you just succumb to it, can be kind of dangerous and can turn you into a cynic or into a kind of a, they don't make them like they used to person, which is a little dangerous. And I like this quote. It's a little pretentious, but I think it sort of captures this idea that, you have to negotiate with nostalgia. If you don't like pretentious quotes, I like this meme from a few years ago. I have no idea who did this, but I found it really funny, just this idea that you can so profoundly misunderstand history that this can actually feel right. And as a sort of wannabe historian, this is really scary to me, right? That the history is so fragile. And I also find it like really, really funny. And when it comes to pixels, these old pixels from the 70s and 80s and 90s, I think we also kind of lost track of what they actually used to be, right? We think today that this is a pixel font, that those are pixels. But actually, back in the day, pixels looked more like this, right? The rendering of pixels was so limited that pixels themselves came carrying half of the work with them. They had texture, they had edges, they had their own almost personality. Like if you surrounded by them with other pixels, they would breathe together because the circuitry was analog, right? Mario never looked like this. Mario looked more like this. Like actually much more like a person, even despite all of these limited pixels. Look at Mario Run here and how much more alive and realistic it feels compared to the sort of reference material on the left. And I think that's something we lost about pixels, and it's worth kind of celebrating. And I took some photos of, some of the old CRTs, and you can see how, pixels don't even want to conform to the places they were put. They just spread around. They don't care as much. They're not very precise. They're kind of messy. You can see here, there's all these imperfections, all of these strange shadows and lines. And you can see here, you celebrate a straight line because no line is ever straight, right? On an old display, it all is very, very messy. And I can't help but think, every time pixels got smaller and sharper and capable of expressing more and more colors, of course we gained a lot. Of course we gained a lot, but we also lost something. And there is no better customer than an old pixel than an 8x8 pixel font. So what is an 8x8 pixel font? You've all probably seen it. It's something that looks like this. It's the most rudimentary font that ever can be. Why 8? Because computers love the number 8. It's an incredibly limiting space to design a font, and yet thousands of 8x8 pixel fonts existed. Pixel fonts that are 8x8 are like the worst of both worlds, right? They have all of the limitations of pixel fonts, but they also have all of the limitations of monospace fonts or typewriter fonts. Nobody respects an 8x8 pixel font. And yet, in my career, I collected close to 4,000 8x8 pixel fonts, and some of them are scrolling behind me right now. And I can't help but admiring a lot of them because they're actually beautiful and creative in some really, really interesting ways. And I want to show you some of those ways today. Clearly, one of them doesn't have lowercase, which is really interesting. Or maybe it only has 2 letters. But here's some examples, for example, of a stencil or a military font. And look at how many versions of that people created over the years and how they're all kind of beautiful. Each one is actually great, and they're all distinct from each other, even though the palette, the space, is so limited. These are some historical fonts I found, and again, it's surprisingly amazing how well they look, at least to me. Of course, tons of sci-fi fonts out there, as you can imagine, in the arcade games in the 70s and 80s, a lot of sci-fi fonts. These are some of my favorites. This particular one you might recognize. It's called MICR or Data 7. It had multiple names, and it existed as a real font. And of course, somebody made an 8x8 rendition of it. Well, not just somebody. Many, many people made 8x8 renditions of the Data 70 font. And they all look great. They all look great. It's so funny they can pick and choose between so many of them, even though it's technically just one font. It's amazing how in pixel fonts, just to go skeuomorphic, just to add a little bit dimensionality, it doesn't take that much. Sometimes it's literally a singular pixel and add texture. They can add dimensionality. They can add a shadow on top of the things that come from the pixels themselves that we already talked about. Some of the pixel fonts, some of the 8x8 pixel fonts actually came with color. And it wasn't like a color that you would recognize today from color fonts. Every single pixel was colored by hand. But what's really cool about it is that there's not that many pixels to color, so you can imagine that. You can actually make it work. There were also, here's some examples of some of the color pixel fonts that I had, and so many colors, so many textures. It's kind of amazing. You can also see that some of the color fonts chose to put a shadow or some sort of an outline. These are fonts that would be often on busy backgrounds, so they're easier to spot. But the computers were not powerful enough to draw shadows or outlines. So they were in the font itself. They were all part of the font with this very, very specific color. And so look at some of the shapes of those letters. Look at those Qs, for example. Like, we all admire Qs in vector fonts, but there are Qs to be admired in pixel fonts, including the Quake Q that's staring you in the face right in the middle. Or how many different ways there still are to disambiguate a 0 from an O, even in such a limited space. Or how many great-looking ampersands are actually out there in 8x8 pixel fonts. And here, I sort of captured a few of my favorite letter forms I've ever seen in pixel fonts. And what's really kind of amazing is that these would not work in a vector font. You can't just grab them and transplant them. You've probably seen some vector revisions of pixel fonts. They never feel great, because those here are unique to this medium, and they can never really travel outside of this medium, which is something a lot of people don't really appreciate. The pixel font can only exist as a pixel font. These are some of my favorite pixel fonts today, but if you ask me tomorrow, I will probably choose 5 different ones. Like, look at how good these are, like how crafted and meticulous they are, but at the same time, very, very approachable. And this is something that also, to me, feels kind of amazing about pixel fonts, is how easy they are to pick up and run with. So imagine you actually have a pixel font that you want to design. Right, you get this like 8x8 matrix, and you try a few letter forms, and you're like, okay, this is looking pretty good. I'm liking this, and very quickly you realize, like, wait, oh, they're all touching each other. I didn't leave enough room for space between letter forms. I actually maybe didn't know I had to do that. So, well, now I'm gonna figure out what to do. Maybe I leave 1 pixel at the bottom. Maybe I leave 2 pixels at the bottom, right? And very quickly, you learn how much of a change that is to the appearance of a font, right? There's like little white space definition. And then, of course, maybe you do lowercase, so you start saying, okay, I'm going to shave off 1 pixel from the top, and that sort of works, but then I have a problem with the B, because you kind of want the ascender to look good, so maybe I lower all of this a little bit down. Maybe I lower the whole thing down, and it's going to look good. But then, of course, the next thought you would have, like, what about descenders? Right? That's also a thing that exists. So maybe you pretend they don't matter at all, and you put a J like this, and you put a Y like this, and it sort of doesn't make you feel very happy, because that's not what you're supposed to do with descenders. So maybe you do go back to having a line at the bottom, and it works for a J and a Y, but it's not going to work for a G. So maybe you have 2 lines, and you back to... Very quickly, you're learning all of this strange relationship with ascenders, descenders, and the M box itself. And maybe at some point, you get tired, and you say, you know what, I just hate lowercase. I'm just going to go do smaller versions of the big letters, and you accidentally reinvented small caps, maybe without knowing that's what they're called. You might also start wondering, like, how thick can I make those letters? Right? The space seems incredibly limited, 8 pixels across, and you have to leave some of those pixels for white space. But you can do 1 pixel, you can do 2, you can do 3. Can you do 4? It's not too bad. Okay, can you do 5? Oh my God, it works with 5? That's incredible. Surely it would not work with... Okay, it's not quite working, of course. It's more of a decorative font at this point, but like, how incredible it is that you can do 6 pixel width in an 8x8 matrix, and it's still registered as the shape of a letter. More of a testament to the power of typography than anything else. But nevertheless, it's really, really cool. And then you can start sort of figuring out, okay, what if I put this width thickness here or here? And you're learning about contrast, and you're learning about stress, again, maybe without knowing what they're called. Maybe you start experimenting with serifs. Maybe you start experimenting with scripted letters. wait, could I do connected scripted letters? Would that even work in a monospace 8x8 pixel font? It turns out so many people made connected scripted letters. It's kind of incredible. Outlines? Huh. Italic? Reverse, okay. You're learning that reverse italic doesn't work, but it's so easy to learn because it's so easy to make those quick shapes and learn very, very quickly. You can even do italic and serifs. And maybe you have to cheat here and there. Maybe there's no room for all of the serifs, but there's room for enough serifs for it to register as a serif font. Before we had emoji and emoticons, we had semi-graphics. Before we had icons fonts, people wanted icon fonts. And you can do that as well. You can even start getting tired of some of the limitations of fonts and say, you know what if I had like a pixel color that's in between the background and the foreground? I would use it to just sort of provide a little bit of a smoothness around the letters. And you just invented anti-aliasing. Except it's not a programmatic, algorithmic anti-aliasing. It's literally artisanal, right? All of those pixels is put by hand. But again, it's not that hard to do in a pixel font. Maybe you get tired of the, and you know, very, very quickly, you can get from, is this me making this sound? Okay, let's see if it happens again. What if you have, you can move very, very quickly, sometimes within a space of a day, from a very simple 8x8 font to something that looks nothing like an 8x8 font you would imagine. And maybe you get tired of the 8x8 thing and you want to try something else. And you can realize that even 4x8, you can still encode some personality into your font. Maybe you get tired that all of the widths are the same and you start working on the proportional typeface. Maybe you get tired of the fact that some of the letter forms don't go well together. You invent kerning pairs. And so on, and so on, and so on. What's really kind of amazing about pixel fonts is that I honestly believe you can do all of this in like a day. Right? In a day, you can go through like a big chunk of the history of typesetting yourself, just figuring out like some of the things by just starting to make a pixel letter and seeing some of the kind of challenges and some of the limitations, trying to fight with them. It's a lot more approachable thing than traditional typography, but a lot of those things are incredibly complicated and it takes days, if not weeks, to master. And the funny thing is that, looking at this now, God, I wish there was a way for us to design a font together just to put this in practice. Let's design a font together. So let's, if you have a phone, if you have a computer, let's get it out there. If you're interested in participating, I have a thing for us to do together, and we see how it works. Hopefully the gods of Wi-Fi and all of this is gonna look kindly upon us. But I will show a page, and if you go to this page, and hopefully if everything was well, if you follow the instructions, we could all sort of do something together. So if you have a phone or a device, use this QR code or type in the URL, and we'll see what happens. So I give you all some time to, if you're actually getting what you're supposed to be getting, can you shout it out? Can you say like it's working? Perfect. Okay. All right, I see the first person already. Okay, let's look at what we have. So let's see if it works. Let me put it on the screen for a little bit more. The URL is also going to be in a corner, so if you miss it. But let's see what we have. Okay. So these are some of your letters that you're designing. Please remember this is meant to be uppercase A, but all right, this seems to be working. So you can see some of the things. Maybe you can recognize your letter there. If you spot the place of your letter, it shouldn't move. So hopefully you can catch on. But let's see what else we got. So far we have 89 letters, which is really, really cool. If you make a mistake, if you want to send it again, there's a button to do so as well. So don't worry about it. And yeah, let's wait for a while, let's see what happens. I'm seeing I see some people resubmitting their letters, which is really cool. I see some really, look at this one. This is so nice. I mean, they're all very interesting. There's a tiny one right here. I've never seen anything like this here with this sort of sticking out crossbar. So whoever did this is really cool. Yeah. Okay, so we have 206. Let's see if we can get to 300. Of course, we're not going to design a whole alphabet right now because that would require a lot of time. But we're starting with the letter A because I just wanted to show you some things. So, okay, 240, 248, this is great. 255, which is an important number for computers. Here we go. Thank you so much for doing this. This is actually really fun for me as well. Look at this one. I love this one. Okay, 278. Can we get to 300? All right. If you're wondering why some of those numbers go down, ask me after. Okay. 15 more. This is dangerous. Okay, 12 more. Oh my God. Okay, some of them definitely very interesting letters. Okay, I think I might have to stop right here because we're going to run out of time. So I'm going to freeze it right now. You can still send yours, and it will matter later. But let's take a look at what we have here, because one of the interesting things about pixel fonts is that they're so rigid, you can also do some interesting analysis of them. So let me show you, for example, these are all your letters ordered by how many pixels are there, which is really cool, right? It's so hard to imagine this doing with regular fonts, but it's so easy to count pixels, especially if there's only 64 of them, right? So you can see the really, really thick A at the end and a very, really small one. How about we can order them by width? And you can see what is the most popular width of an 8x8 pixel font. It turns out to be 8 in this case, but 7 and 6 is actually more popular than 8. But you can go even as low as 3, which is kind of interesting, right? How about height? You can do the same thing here. You can see this squatty 4 A's, kudos to anybody who's done this, all the way to really big 8x8 A letters. They would obviously touch each other if they were typeset, but it doesn't matter as much here. But the last thing I wanted to show you is, right now. Thank you so much. Appreciate this. So you have the different heights here, but I think the one that's really, I do sound different now. If you do, I want to show you one last thing, which is order them by similarity. So you can see that most of the letters you sent to the stage were unique, but there are a few here. If you made those, you have a friend somewhere in the room. So you might, I don't know how you figure it out, but there's 3 people who made the same letter A. But I'm going to do one last thing, which I don't actually know how it's going to turn out. So remember I told you I have this 4,000 font database of fonts that were already, professional fonts that were already used in video games and applications and whatnot. Now I'm going to, from this list, remove all of the fonts that are in this library. And we'll see how many truly unique letters are out there in our list today. Turns out, quite a few. It sort of feels like maybe 70%, or maybe even more. And I think that's something truly incredible about pixel fonts, which is, imagine this, pixel fonts have been around for 40-something years, maybe 50. 8x8 pixel fonts, the most popular kind of pixel fonts. I collected a lot of them, and yet all of you have made unique contributions to 8x8 pixel fonts within a few minutes. And I think that's the power of pixel fonts. We're going to come back to this later, but I want to finish some of the thoughts about all of this stuff. So a lot of my work is talking about the complexity of fonts, right? The hundreds of years of terms and nuances and things we all have to learn if you want to touch the fonts in even a small way. And I think to me, today, the message is the opposite. I think I wanted to tell you that fonts can also be simple and beautiful and non-pretentious at all. And you can jump into them and do fun stuff and don't worry about all of this like hundreds and centuries of this baggage. And I think there's something like really, really cool about this. And I also wanted to talk about the thing that surprises even me. I said earlier that pixel fonts were only there because computers couldn't render vector fonts. It actually turns out that pixel fonts existed long before pixels. Like this is a lot of the typewriting manuals taught people how to make their letter fonts from letters, treating letters as pixels. And there were so many people doing this because it's actually really fun. This is a device from over 100 years ago that you could like impress a letter on a document or a check as a security measure, turn to a letter you want, press it, and under the hood, it's a pixel font. It's just not electronic at all. There's another device, if you look it up later, it's called a German device called Hellschreiber. This is a pixel font encoded electromechanically, which is not how we used to seeing pixel fonts, right? These are all pixel fonts. Why not? This I bought in Chicago. Fascinating to me because this is, again, the 5x7, kind of like the most common font that you see everywhere in all of these industrial devices. The top one was clearly made by a machine, not very well, printed on wood. But the bottom one was done by a person with whatever gun or whatever they did. And I find it sort of fascinating. This person didn't do a great job with aligning anything, and it still works, right? And there's like the power of a pixel font that like making this pixel font way outside of pixels, way outside of a grid, can still sort of be readable. And I found it kind of fascinating. This is an 18th century cross-stitch font that I actually recreated because also recreating fonts is very easy. So I can just really like use it and type something. It doesn't have a 0, so I have to type an O, but it works. How many of you saw this? It's a flip dot display. It's pixels without screens. And again, it's so easy to like sort of type into it. And I'm going to slow it down because it's really fun to watch it go. You've probably seen it on buses and everything. It usually is much faster. But it's really fun to see pixels behaving like this, especially if they're a little bit broken. Lego at some point just gave up and said, here, have your pixels. For 50 years they tried, for 60 years they tried not to do that. And they were like, okay, here's some pixels, stop bothering us, which I found really, really funny. But there is something beautiful about this idea that like, there is something powerful about a pixel of the right size. And we all try to find the pixel of the right size, both literally and conceptually. Like a pixel that's too big, it's not going to give you enough freedom. You won't be able to do anything that's useful, right? You cannot do a font, or you could do a 3x3 pixel font, but it just wouldn't be legible. But a pixel too small, and the freedom is suffocating. It's just too much work, too much pressure, too much time to do anything. And I think finding pixels of a certain size is something that we had, and then we lost a little bit. And again, nostalgia, right? Like this thing that I mentioned, one of the good antidotes to nostalgia is just history, just researching more history. Chicago was this beautiful font in 1984, and it reappeared in 2001 on many generations of iPods, but it also appeared in the middle. So many people might recognize Final Fantasy VI and other games from the 90s that used a version of Chicago for some reason, just because Chicago was so beautiful. You can also imagine all sorts of different abandoned pixel fonts reappearing, right? The Windows system font that's so unloved that it doesn't even have a name. The Lisa font from 1983 that was abandoned because Apple released the Macintosh 1 year later. eWord, Apple's sort of proprietary like internet thing from the late 90s. Nobody remembers this, but look at the font. Some people are still into pixel fonts. This is like 64 by 64 pixel font. Like imagine how hard it is to do it. Some people might also like try to do different scripts and languages and realize 8 by 8 can actually be too limiting. This is, I think, a Japanese character, and it's 20 by 24. And it also teaches you how computerization or the spread of computers had to be slower in some countries just because they couldn't render the letters, just because like the Western language lacked out in being so simple that 8 by 8 was enough. But this also goes the other way. This thing, this nostalgia and this negotiation with history, because if you use pixels today, computers are so much better with pixels than they used to be, so you can have a lot of fun. Here, I tried ray tracing with pixels. It's not really ray tracing. It's a lot more simple, but it's really kind of fun to see how you can do this very, very easily, much more easily than with like modern objects. Or here, a modern thing, modern convention from fonts. What if pixel fonts were variable fonts? Why not? You can have a lot of fun with this. And there's something really, really fun in seeing this and saying, this is pixels pretending to be pixels, pretending to be pixels. Computers are powerful enough that you can do this now, all in a service that's showing you Chicago. And I wonder how many people are still suspicious. You should be. So this is not Chicago. This is not the final Chicago. This is Chicago from 1983, from a Mac that's never been released, like a beta version of a Mac, you would call it today. This is the real Chicago. And of course, you probably didn't see that much of a difference, but I'm going to zoom it up because I think it's really important. So I found some older versions of unreleased system for Mac OS, and I grabbed all of these Chicago versions, and I plotted them. And it's really, really interesting. The orange one is the final one, and the black ones are sort of the intermediate ones. And I think it's really, really interesting to see like how much nuance and how much craft is there in those fonts. And I think that's the beauty also of pixel fonts. Like you can admire them because they mean something to you. They're nostalgic. There's nothing wrong with sort of being awash in nostalgia and loving those pixel fonts. You can now maybe look at them differently and seeing them as this vehicle to enter typography in a much easier way, or have more fun in a way that typography sometimes doesn't allow you to have. Or maybe if you're a designer, it's still fun to craft a font, and even though you can do a letter in 3 minutes, you might choose to do it in 3 months and enjoy it as well. And so with that in mind, I'm going to give you something on the way out. So if you reload your page right now, you will be able actually to finish your alphabet if you're interested and add all sorts of other things. Just reload it. You won't lose your A, I promise. You can save it as OTF, or you can save it as JSON, which is what I've been doing all along if you're interested in that. So please let me know if you end up doing something interesting or designing a font that you're proud of, or even something you're not proud of at all. I would really appreciate it. But right now, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Marcin. Oh my, fonts, huh?
Hello.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. Wow, that's so impressive. Just to see the dedication and the care and attention, it's just absolutely incredible. We have quite a few questions that came up, so we have a bit of time to ask them. One of them came very quickly. What do you think about the accessibility aspect of pixel fonts in general?
Accessibility aspects of pixel fonts. Yeah, I think, you know, as I mentioned, like pixel fonts have been limited, right? In the same way like typewriter fonts can be limited. But I think I found that sometimes the kind of limited palette, it makes it easier for you not to make egregious mistakes with fonts. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard to make an 8 by 8 pixel font too thin, for example, and hard to read. So, you know, I also remember that there were some fonts specifically designed to help with people who have maybe learning disabilities, and they kind of looked much rougher, which I think you could still approximate in pixel fonts. So, I don't know. I think I can imagine pixel fonts being accessible in all the ways that matter, but it probably takes as, you know, the similar amount of effort as like with vector fonts. Yeah.
I think also when can you hear me okay? Yes. I also think that It's so interesting, like when you're speaking about nostalgia, right? It kind of brings back memories, of course, but on the other hand, I often speak here in the industry today about everything looking the same, everything feeling the same, everything sounding the same, and so on. And so the personality that Pixel fonts have,
Yeah.
it kind of has transported in some way in many fonts, but many fonts also just look very, very similar. System fonts
Yeah.
looking very, very similar. However, I don't think that, let's say, a digital product that would be displayed on a, on an iPhone or on Android would be using a Pixel font as a default for their UI, right? So the
Yeah.
question is then, how do we bring that personality that we kind of had and enjoyed and loved in Pixel fonts to, I guess, modern expectations of what a digital product delivered today has to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question for probably for somebody smarter than me, but I think some of those things come in waves, and I think, like, for example, iOS 7 was this departure from skeuomorphism because we could have clean things, and we got used to the concepts of user interfaces enough that you could simplify some of those things. And I think I'm actually seeing, I don't know how many of you actually use Pixel fonts sometimes without caring about all of this history and stuff and just for the aesthetics alone. Because I see sometimes even new designers being like, I just like this feel of it. So it might sort of swing back as we sort of see more people reconnecting with Pixel or connecting with Pixel fonts for the same time and sort of taking them for a ride without sort of caring a lot about nostalgia and whatnot. And as for the system font personality, I'm actually very, very curious, right? Like I do know how, I think I mentioned this briefly, but Inter, San Francisco, Roboto, they have so much work to do, right? They have so many responsibilities, so many characters, so many like widgets and stuff that it's, maybe hard to imagine. Like probably San Francisco is the way it is because most of MacBooks are gray. It's the same reason that you can imagine colorful MacBooks, but it's much harder to find the right color for the person. So you have to now invent all of the colors at the same time.
Right.
I'm not a shill for Apple, even though they just announced the iMacs in new colors. But
fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, this was unexpected. Jennifer asked,
Hi, Jennifer.
new Figma update.
Okay. Like previous or the UI 3?
No, well, specifically, do you know why Figma seems to be, I'm quoting, less good since the last update? It's hard to find essential information to work well, and do you know if there is an update coming up soon?
I imagine this pertains to UI 3, which was the interface update that we released. We actually kept releasing it over a big chunk of the year to more and more people. Jennifer, is this accurate? Are you even here?
Could also be online.
Yeah, that's why I'm like. Jennifer and everybody else who feels like that, please send us feedback because we kept evolving. So the answer to, is there an update coming? There are always updates coming. So it's hard for me to say, but it's hard for me to say what specifically Jennifer or other people don't like. So would love feedback. You can find me on all the social media. And we actually talk a lot about like how we made some changes, and we did make some new changes or even reversals based on people's feedback. So thank you for the feedback, and we all appreciate it, but it's hard to talk about some of the details. Yeah.
Also, just jumping on that, because this is kind of another thing that's built up on top. Do you think there are some hidden gems, features, or treasures in Figma that you wish more designers were aware of and would use daily?
Oh, that's a good one. All right, so I have a spicy one. So this is not a spicy one, but actually
spicy.
Genuinely surprised me. When we released UI 3, it surprised all of us how many people care about rulers. So if fewer people use rulers, that would make my life easier, but that's not the answer. Also, don't worry, like please use your rulers, they're not going away. I'm not saying rulers are on the way out. But I think there's a bunch of small things that I think people are sometimes surprised, like paste to replace, the keyboard shortcut, if people use Command-Shift-R, it's like a really, really power up to a lot of things, and sometimes people do those things manually. Copy as PNG is like one of my favorites. Also, this is so hard to imagine, if you hold a frame and you hold Option and Shift and you can like resize it around, and it's so hard to do it without showing But here are some, those are some of the ones that I like, but yeah.
Yeah, if more come up eventually, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, probably a lot, but I don't
Well, we have also some questions that are asked in a pixel font.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Can I judge it?
Yeah, you can judge it.
Which one?
Like from Anna.
Oh my God, what is this? Anna, with an H at the end of your name, please tell me what font this is, because this looks, it's like a grungy pixel font. It's a Google font. Okay, no, I love Google fonts. Yeah.
When using, so the question is, when using pixel fonts for games or web projects, how do you approximate how they would have looked on an analog display? For example, the Mario running comparison.
Yeah. So I think, I actually think there's nothing wrong with like very sharp pixel fonts and, just display it like on a screen without any treatment, because it's another way to do this, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what we had before. I think there are many ways that people do that, including like there are some emulators that actually allow you to like approximate an old CRT. So I think I would just like choose whatever like feels right to you. You know how some pixel fonts have those like empty lines between, just to approximate an old black and white computer display. So some of them have that built in. So I think it really like depends on what you want and what you do, and whether you're aiming for nostalgia or aesthetics or none of the above. But I think what's really kind of amazing, and something I didn't really say explicitly, is how all of this, pixels pretending to be pixels, pretending to be pixels, is also possible because we have screens with like really, really high resolutions. So we can go back to like emulating those imperfections that we used to hate maybe, and put them, because we have such a precise rendering. And I think there's something kind of incredible about this, and I see more and more people use this effectively, adding noise to the UI.
Sure.
Like this weird, what is the chromatic aberration is very popular in some spaces, stuff like that. Yeah.
Marcin, imagine the world. Figma, pixel fonts, Figma in a pixel font. So the question is, do you have the ambition for a retro-looking Figma? And would it even still work?
Oh yeah, 100%. The answer is 100% no. Because
you don't have the ambition, or it wouldn't work?
It's probably possible to do it today if somebody really wanted to, right? Because Figma is web. You can sort of like inspect elements and do like your own overrides. I think this is just like not a great mashup for things. The funny thing is that we did this as an April Fool's joke in 2019, so that's part of the answer. I wish I could show you. It's obviously existed just for a day. I feel like my microphone is doing something again. Do I have funny shaped ears or something?
No,
you don't have to tell me if that's.
Well, from my perspective, your ears look amazing.
Okay. And the other thing is that I think there was somebody who made, you should look it up if you haven't seen it yet because it's beautiful. Somebody made Figma on a play date. Like not actual Figma, it's I think just like funny little prototype, but it just looks so good. Playdate is this like little device, I don't know how many of you know this, like very low resolution gaming device made by Panic, and it just looks so amazing that in a way, I don't want to see Figma as it is today on the pixel font. I want to see Figma as if it was designed in like 1984. I think that could be an interesting challenge. Like what if you put Figma on a Macintosh, but it can only do like 3.5 things because the computer was so, what would you choose? It's an interesting constraint.
So what would you choose?
Right? Like,
there's a conversation that can just keep going.
No, because you know how like pixel fonts are like, they used to be all of these technical constraints, and they no longer exist, but you can still use the constraints. You can still keep the constraint that it's no longer technical. You can still do 8x8 fonts, even though you can have fonts much bigger. It's a really interesting exercise about like what of the constraints that we surpassed because technology got better are worth bringing back.
Yeah, that's exciting. Maybe just one more final question, and then if you have, of course, more questions, you can find Marcin then later next to the Smashing membership stand. Feedback on Figma or whatnot, everything is welcome, right?
Yes.
Fantastic. Kim is wondering, and got 7 upvotes there as well.
What font is it?
It's Playfair.
Oh, okay. I thought they're all like in separate fonts now.
Well, they are now. It's like a trend setting up now. But the question is, so this was not a Figma slide deck. What are you using? And awesome presentation, by the way. 2 clap emoji and 7 people looking.
Oh, wow. And 6 eyes.
6 eyes. I think it represents
it's
more
like
people.
a zodiac code. So this is my first presentation. Please don't take my manager. I didn't use Figma at all. This is the first presentation I've done that didn't use any design tool. It was all HTML and CSS and JavaScript. All of it. There was no movie in it at all, like no animations. It was all done programmatically, with the exception of the aliens, of course. Although, it would be fun to do like aliens in CSS. So it was all like handmade JavaScript, no libraries. It's very old school, partly by design, partly in correspondence with the message. But can I tell you something that actually surprised me, that you might not believe me? I started working on this talk by making those transitions and building this like pixel engine that I made. And then eventually I had so much more fun, and in the process of making the slides, I learned so much that I then put those messages back in slides. So it was like a very interesting kind of like, you learn something by making a prototype. Because I thought it would be more like a historical look at pixel fonts, and I realized like, hey, this is actually really, really, really fun and interesting. And none of my JavaScript code is like very impressive. It's not optimized, but you could still see like you could do a lot of those things because computers are so powerful. So if you're interested in seeing it open source, please let me know, because I'm happy to do that. I don't think it's particularly impressive, but if you're interested in seeing how it works or how it works with the server, and by the way, there were 2 moderators behind the scenes removing some of the letters. They were maybe not on topic, let's put it this way. So we had this whole like little infrastructure. Thank you to both of you, by the way. If you're interested in like seeing how it was made, please let me know, because I'm happy to write it up, but I would love to see if this is just interesting to anybody.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Marcin. And if you have more questions, again, the membership stand is the way to go. Thank you, Marcin, for being with us.
Thank you.